If you're an internal or corporate communicator, chances are you've had to conduct an employee feedback survey. Perhaps you're even gearing up for one right now. Surveys have long been part of the internal communications landscape. You file them under things you have to do. Get them done and then move on. But that's not moving the needle on employee engagement. C-suite residents love the measurable data that they provide. Surveys can also uncover problem areas and give you benchmarking stats to improve employee engagement across the organization. But on the flip side, they can be expensive, ineffective, time-consuming, difficult to set up, and sometimes it can feel impossible to get the whole organization to buy in. So, how do you turn your employee survey project into something that actually moves the needle on employee engagement? This and so much more on this episode of the Internal Comms Procast. The Internal Comms Procast is sponsored by Circle. Circle helps you easily track and understand your organization's engagement at every level. Track how your people are engaging with your intranet, app, and website content by automatically personalizing their experience. Learn more at cerkl.com. Circle, weird spelling, awesome engagement. Welcome to the Internal Comms Procast. I am your host, Barry Williams. For this episode, we wanted a new perspective on how surveys can help communicators measure and improve employee engagement. We turned our attention across the pond to the growing UK movement, Engage for Success, and one of its leaders.
So my name's Dodds, and I'm an engagement consultant, and I also work within the Engage for Success movement in the UK, which is the national movement all around employee engagement.
Although it is little more than a decade old, Engage for Success, founded by David McLeod and Nita Clark, is helping the UK become the epicenter of employee engagement culture. The quality of content and thought leadership coming out of this movement is impressive and will up the game for any internal communications pro.
I think the real push for us in recent years was the start of the Engage for Success movement, which came about because the government asked David and Nita to do a review of engagement in the UK. And then as a result of those of what came out of that report, they asked them to set up a task force to actually sort of move the conversation forwards, and that's what happened in 2012. So I guess that's partly why we've moved so quickly in terms of that conversation piece in this country. It's because we've got this task force, this movement that was initially supported by the government and has been supported by very large companies and influential people and so on.
Jo is a member of the core team for Engage for Success. She is an independent employee engagement consultant, speaker, trainer, and facilitator who specializes in productivity, well-being, and employee engagement. She is also the co-host of the Power to Live More podcast. Jo has enjoyed a varied and exciting career in communications, engagement, and consulting, but her work with employee engagement began in the HR department.
Well, originally I have an HR background, so I was involved in that in a practitioner role, and then through working as an employee engagement consultant and working within Engage for Success, then I've obviously had more of a sort of focus on that as part of the whole engagement piece. But I also, in the meantime, had a social media and digital consultancy for a number of years. So the reason I got back into the HR space was all around internal comms and collaboration and communication using social and digital tools.
Surveys are just one of the tools Jo utilizes in her practice. The approach to surveys that Jo suggests may sound a little out of order compared to the way you do things today, but its employee-first sentiment can pay big engagement dividends. If you're trying to improve the efficacy of your employee surveys, Jo suggests starting by gathering buy-in from stakeholders and staff first, as opposed to waiting for the survey to go out and hoping for the best.
So firstly, it's about support across the whole organisation. So that's not just that internal comms or HR or whoever decide that it's a good idea and sort of try and push it onto everybody. It is the fact that the senior team, and the employees know and understand that, asking these questions and getting people involved is a good thing to do. Firstly, it's about having that ongoing sort of evidence, if you like, that it's a valuable thing to do. I spoke at an event a good few years ago now, and somebody said to me, "Oh, we've got our survey coming up next month. We need to get going with the PR for it." And I was a bit challenging, but my response to that was, well, if you have to PR the survey that much, then it's probably not working very well. People probably don't want to do it. It's probably not, very trusted.
Be sure to consider the timing of your survey. Just because this time of year works for you doesn't mean it's right for everyone else. Here's some things to consider. Don't hit people up for feedback immediately before their annual review. You may get false positives from folks who think the boss is watching. Be sensitive to the schedules of each department. You don't want to give the finance department a big survey to fill out during the close of the budget year. Your HR department doesn't want another thing to do during open enrollment, etc. Next, your employee feedback team should be looking at your survey questions with a critical eye. Try to keep things simple and short. Your accurate response rate will improve.
Yay!
Although measuring feedback year to year is important, Joe warns that you should be willing to cut or change questions that aren't getting you the data your organization needs to better engage staff.
I think it is about getting the questions right. And it's interesting, I challenged the person I was speaking to this week about that in order to be flexible with your questions, knowing that when you asked the question last time, it didn't quite give you the information you needed, do you change it, which hopefully will give you the most recent, most up-to-date, most appropriate information, or do you keep it the same so that you can compare like for like, year on year, or quarter on quarter, or however often you're doing it? And the answer he gave me was, well, you have a core of questions that you do keep the same, but then you do have to be flexible. Otherwise, it makes the survey, less relevant and less useful to you. So it's really about getting the questions right, but I think it's also about the flexibility of those as well. And really, clearly use a supplier who understands your business and understands the things I've said already, the frequency and all that sort of thing, so that it works for you.
After this break, Joe will share the important steps that you should be taking after your survey to increase its organizational impact. The Internal Comms Procast is sponsored by Circle. Circle automatically personalizes your staff newsletter, website, and intranet using the content you're already creating. Let Circle help you measure and increase employee engagement while saving your team more than 40 hours a month. Learn more at circle.com. That's CERKL.com. Circle, weird spelling, awesome engagement. We're back with more from UK employee engagement thought leader Joe Dodds. Your survey is out, employees are responding. It can be easy to get overwhelmed at the amount of data that's pouring in. Joe suggests using a survey tool with sentiment analysis to help you decode the results of open-ended questions.
You do a survey and you've got hundreds of people writing lots of information. It's really hard to collate that and turn it into really valuable feedback, or it was, until we started to get the tools that enabled us to do that. They review the sentiment, so they don't just ask questions where you tick a box to say yes or no, or they say, marks out of 10, where they then analyse those results. They're actually taking lots of questions that are qualitative, so they're open questions. What do you think we should do differently? What do you think of the communication within the organisation? What improvements do you think we should make? And they're able to draw out the suggestions and turn them into feedback, which they then feed back in terms of, 20% of people think we should do X, Y, Z. So I think increasingly, as the sophistication of the surveys improves, there's little that can't be measured, because we're not just having to measure yes and no's and marks out of 5 or 10 or whatever, like we might have done in the past.
When you get your full survey results back, it may be tempting to draw quick conclusions and start taking action. But Joe warns that's not the way to go. She suggests taking a bit of time to digest and learn before jumping in with a new plan. This will pay huge dividends for employee engagement.
I think what trips people up is misinterpreting feedback by making assumptions. I think we ask questions, we get an answer, and often organisations scurry off and make changes, do things differently, implement whatever as a result of that feedback. And then it turns out that wasn't exactly what the people meant. And so the true implementation of employee voice within an organization is about asking the questions, but then having the people who've answered the questions be part of the solution so that they work on those changes, those actions as a result of the questions so that they become what they think and want to change, as opposed to they say something and we run off and do it and actually it's not what they meant in the first place. There's a supermarket company in the UK that had a whole thing about that for their customers, which was all about you said, we did. So they put all these things up on the wall that said, the customers complained about this and we resolved it by doing that. And some organizations have picked that up as a way of dealing with employee voice surveys, questions, whatever. So they do the you said this and we did that. I actually think it should be we said and we did. So as an organization, these are the things that we identified as being issues, as being gaps, as being things that we're doing that we could do better. And as an organization, this is what we've done to change that. This is what we've done differently. So it's about getting people together to take the results of a survey and work on what to do next. But it's not, as I say, about the HR or the internal comms or the senior leaders going off and deciding what those things are. It's actually about setting up, focus groups and other groups within the organisation to take responsibility for identifying further what those things are that need to be done differently. And it might be that it's not just, you do the survey and you get the answers. It might be that you go back and say, well, this answer said this. What does that really mean? And can somebody go and do a project to analyse that area of the organisation where there's a problem and actually fully identify what that's all about. So it's not even necessarily taking just the answers to the survey questions and doing stuff. It's actually going back out to that particular pain point, if you like, within the organisation and doing further work on it as a separate project to then come up with what needs to be done differently. I think that's the bit that does fall down so often. And then you're left with senior people and internal comms people and HR people going, oh, we've done a survey. We asked them what they wanted. We did it and they're still not happy. What's the point? And it's not actually that. It's not that, that people, it's that, as I say, they've misinterpreted what the people wanted in the first place because they've not actually really involved them in the whole process.
When your survey results are ready, Joe encourages communicators to share all the feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Addressing the whole situation will help your organization improve and increase the likelihood of people participating honestly in the future when they can see that their voices are heard.
My personal view is that they shouldn't be sanitized, and a lot of organizations do sanitize them and they do only report certain bits back to certain people. And I don't mean if you've got generally less than 10 people in a team, you don't, report that information back because it can be identified. But over and above that, I think, there's little point in doing surveys and not sharing the content fully because people then start to mistrust the process and, know that there's issues in certain areas and that doesn't seem to be reflective in the survey and all that sort of thing. And people lose trust and then you lose people in completing them in the next time you want to run it. But also you don't really fundamentally ever get to the bottom of the issues or resolving those sorts of issues, in which case it then comes down to, why do them in the first place? So for me, it's about including everybody. It's being honest. And I worked with an organisation a while ago who disseminated the results from the survey, and I was getting feedback from all different parts of the organisation to say that these people got the full information, these people only got their own team's information, these people only got their departments, and you could see that it was the managers who felt less comfortable or perhaps where they've got issues or whatever that were holding stuff back, and fundamentally that is not helpful and then undermines the whole process.
When it comes to employee feedback surveys, Joe says there is really only one thing that truly makes a survey valuable to organizational engagement.
I think fundamentally it's that it makes a difference. So many organizations have surveys because it seems to be the thing to do or they think it seems like the right thing to do. But actually, if you do them and nothing happens as a result, then, there's no point doing them in the first place. So to me, it doesn't really matter what type of survey, how you run it. how many questions you ask, what questions you ask, as long as the end result is that it changes things for the better within the organization.
We want to thank Jo so very much for sharing her thoughtful insight. Be sure to check out her podcast, The Power to Live More. She and her fellow UK employee engagement enthusiasts will be hosting the 2019 Engage for Success conference in September. You can learn more about that at engageforsuccess.org.
And I'll continue to be facilitating and training and consulting in employee engagement, generally in the UK. Although, who knows, make me an offer.
On the next Internal Comms Procast, strategic planning. It can be the highlight of your year or something you avoid like the plague. We talk to consultant, speaker, and Professor Sean Williams about how to make strategic planning work for you. He shares his favorite way to tackle this task and how a great strategic plan can help you elevate your position in your organization. Sean will also be sharing why his parents were disappointed when he chose a business career over the arts.
They were very disappointed when I entered the management training program. They said things like, "Well, honey, I know that's not really what you want to do," etc.
See you next time. Internal Comms Procast is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our executive producer is Rachel Foles. Connor Sweeney is our engineer, and Michael Masilli is our digital media specialist. Our theme music is Please Listen Carefully by Jawser via the Free Music Archive. Show notes and more are available at internalcompspro.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at InternalCompsPro. Thank you for listening.